And there's, I think, of two groups of strategies in terms of managing this leachate that you're constantly pulling out of the landfill. One I call leachate management, and this is really just operationally focused. What do we do with this to get it out of our hair so that we can keep running this landfill? And that doesn't always mean treating it. It just means doing something with it. The second approach I would call is treatment, where we're actually going to try and destroy those compounds or remove them so that we can return the water. So in a management approach, we might give that job to someone else or put it off. In a treatment approach, we'll want to do that ourselves and be discharging clean water at the end from our site. So for what I'm calling management, options could be discharged to the sanitary sewer, and you can really only do this if you're close to an urban area. And a lot of times wastewater treatment operators don't like this happening because there's such a difference between leachate quality and domestic wastewater that it can make their job more difficult. You could store it in big tanks on site and haul it away, again, usually to a domestic wastewater treatment plant, and the operators might not really like that. One good thing is the volume is much smaller than we get from our wastewater systems. So even though it's really variable, it's a small portion. You might have a pipe directly to a wastewater treatment plant. You might use an evaporator or an incinerator just to get rid of the water, and then you'll just have some solids left over. You can landfill them again. And on a short term, you can pump your leachate back into the landfill to store it. You can use essentially the landfill as a tank, but you can't do that forever. So that's kind of a short-term management technique. On the treatment side, common approaches are treatment lagoons, so similar to domestic wastewater, and then mechanical treatment plants with a lot of the same pieces that you've seen in other industrial wastewater or domestic wastewater systems. And we'll go through those in a little bit more detail. There's a kind of interesting difference between the way we look at effluent quality for domestic wastewater, which you might have more experience with, versus leachate. So we know our domestic wastewater treatment plants follow the wastewater system's effluent regulations under the Fisheries Act. So same for everyone in Canada, 25 milligrams per liter BOD and TSS. We've got unionized ammonia needs to be less than 1.25 milligrams nitrogen per liter. And then if you're doing chlorination, you've got a bound on the chlorination. So everyone's doing this. This is just kind of the benchmark for clean water that we can put back into the environment pretty much anywhere. Leachate treatment plants are not legislated the same way as domestic wastewater treatment. So they'd be permitted under the site ECA through the Ontario Water Resources Act and the Environmental Protection Act. And because the ECA is kind of like a site-specific law for that specific place, it has some flexibility to take into account the specific leachate quality and quantity, as well as what are the characteristics of the receiving environment for the treated leachate. So it allows a much more tailored approach that's negotiated between the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and whoever's permitting the plant. So there's a little more flexibility and sensitivity to the specifics that you can take in with the ECA approach versus the one size fits all with the domestic wastewater treatment. So that's just one of the difference between the two. A lot of people in the course might have more experience with just regular domestic wastewater. Looking at some of our treatment techniques, if you've taken domestic wastewater or industrial wastewater courses, you're going to see all the same technologies that we see in those. So there's a whole bunch of tools in the toolkit, and as I mentioned, leachate is very variable from site to site, from time to time throughout the landfill life cycle. So different landfills may use different technologies at different times to help meet their needs. So under biological systems, pretty much everything you've seen for domestic wastewater treatment you can use: anaerobic systems, aerobic systems, mixed systems. Again, going back to the BOD to the COD ratio, this is only going to work for a portion of the leachate, and it's going to become less and less applicable over time. One of the really successful biological treatment reactors that's appropriate for leachate treatment, and all of them can be appropriate, but this is one that comes up, I'd say, a little bit more frequently, is a sequencing batch reactor. And I've added a little figure on the left side of the page here. So a sequencing batch reactor is good for two reasons. One is that it is small. So leachate volumes are small compared to things like domestic wastewater, which is a huge continuous volume, relatively smaller, and also more unpredictable. So with a leachate, with a sequencing batch reactor, you have one tank, you'll fill it up, you'll aerate and treat it aerobically as long as you need to meet or to address the quality of that specific batch of leachate. Once it's treated to a specific level as described by your permit, then you'll turn off the aeration and you allow it to settle in that same tank. And then you can decant the liquid effluent and send it to further treatment or discharge it, and then remove the sludge and likely dewater it and put it back in your landfill or incinerate it or something like that. So this approach of having one tank where you do both operations in, as well as operating as a batch where you can keep an eye on it, is really well suited to variable quality of leachate, as well as a small quantity of leachate. So it's something that has been applied successfully, but all these other biological treatment techniques listed are also used. Lagoons are also really common just because they're pretty inexpensive to run, and you can leave the leachate in there for a long time if you need to, but you might use all these other reactors in different plants based on your requirements.